Good morning, everybody. Welcome into the Week 9 edition of Wake and Rake. He, of course, is my buddy Justin Fensterman. I am Ben Heisler. We are glad that you guys are back with us for Week 9 in the NFL. For the next hour or thereabouts, we will be answering your questions while Fensty is trying to do a little bit of a beauty check, get a little up close and personal with his camera. Yeah, it's a good look, buddy. Yeah, like just, I can see even more follicles popping up on the top of your head.
Dude, you're so positive. I really appreciate that, man. Only you and my mom tell me that my hair's growing back. I've had clear hair here for the last decade and a half.
So you're saying that I'm just viewing it from a purely glass half full perspective?
As you should, Ben, because That's what it's all about in life.
All right, very good. So, speaking of glass half full, we have a lot of plays. We have a lot of options. A lot of try to figure out where we want to go this week in DFS and, of course, in season long. And our favorite part of the show is answering your guys' lineup questions, so make sure you send them in right here, whether it be on Periscope, whether it be on YouTube Live, whether it be on Facebook Live. We are here with you guys up until 11:30 a.m. East Coast time, 10:30 a.m. Central time. And Fensty, when we got started, when we did our little preview video for this morning, I was telling you that I am buying in on the New York Jets heading to Miami today, and there are actually a bunch of really strong DFS plays, not necessarily from the sense of these are cash game locks, but I think if you're playing in tournaments today, and I think if you're playing on a site like DraftKings, there's really good value across the board, whether it be guys like Ryan Fitzpatrick and his wide receivers and Preston Williams and Devontae Parker. On the other side, Sam Darnold continues to, get overlooked from the sense that he just hasn't been good. But if you're ever looking for an ideal time to pair him up with Robbie Anderson, you can really make a good argument that maybe a little mini game stack with your tournament lineups this week for the Jets and the Dolphins might be a fun place to start because of the salary savings and because of the upside this week.
No, and Ben, if the Jets are going to have any kind of crazy productive week, I mean, they did beat the Cowboys, let's not forget that. But at the same time, it is in this matchup versus Miami. And again, you mentioned the Ryan Fitzpatrick revenge game narrative that we're now facing. So with that, also coming in, we mentioned this a little bit as well in the preview video, that Le'Veon Bell apparently has been talking with Adam Gase about his usage and why not use this guy and utilize him a little bit more. Something that I've wondered, Ben, is can you get this guy some short passes? I think that's what the Jets need to do moving forward, not focus on the deep threat. But if Darnold is just throwing out of control, then why not go to one of the best pass-catching NFL running backs in the league with Le'Veon Bell and do short little dump-off passes to him and work your way down the field in that regard? Clock control is going to be very important if the Jets are winning this game.
I think you're especially right. But the other component, too, is that especially with the injuries on Miami's side, Xavier Howard was the last lone decent cornerback on this team, and they've already been bottom 5 in the NFL at stopping the deep pass this year. And again, you're right. The Jets, especially with how Adam Gase likes to play, he tends to slow things down. They tend to run the ball, and it's just a weird dynamic right now, too, with Le'Veon Bell. He's done Fensty, I made an argument that they should try and consider moving him back to Pittsburgh. And a lot of people laughed at me and then found out that Le'Veon actually said in some conversations that he was possibly going back to Pittsburgh. Like, that was his agent talking to him. It would have made all the sense in the world because he knows that offensive line. He understands the patient scheme. And now that Adam Gase has all this control in New York as well, he doesn't want that guy there. He doesn't want to get soaked up by all that cap room that Le'Veon Bell is taking up. But listen, if there is ever an ideal time to try and use him and maximize him, it has to be this week.
Right, and I go back to the Week 5 matchup he had against Philly, seeing the 9 targets, 7 receptions on 9 targets against a Philly team that you can absolutely throw on. This is what the Jets are needing to do, and Le'Veon Bell will be in a few of my lineups. I have a decent amount of exposure to him in season long. Why? Because I play in a lot of auctions, and when you're getting a guy who's essentially a top 5 pick, top 4 running back, even though he sat out last year, when you're getting him for under $50 in your auctions, it's very enticing, Ben, rather than paying $60 whatever for Saquon Barkley, but just not getting it done from the production standpoint. But that Philly matchup is what stands out to me because, again, you give the guy 9 targets, short dump-off passes, and you're going to be able to put up a little bit of offense here. There's going to still be a lot of pressure on Robbie Anderson. Jameson Crowder in the field as well, going to the middle. You could get him there. But this is all about Le'Veon Bell, especially after we're hearing about conversations with the coach about usage. You can't really trust Adam Gase, but if there's any week to trust this Jets offense, it's against this sad Miami team.
There's 3 running backs, if we're looking specifically on DraftKings this week, and I see questions coming in from our usual group of suspects, PD Dubs, Corey out in Winnipeg. If you have a question, go ahead and shoot it to us either on Facebook Live, on YouTube Live, on Periscope, wherever you guys are watching this, right here on Twitter. They should pop up. If for whatever reason we don't acknowledge that we've seen them, at least every couple of questions, we mention the ones that are coming in. Go ahead and resubmit it. Sometimes it doesn't always get through, so we'll make sure that we get to you, or just tweet the questions to us and we'll make sure that we see them and we're able to read them. So we'll get to PD Dubs and we'll get to Corey coming up in just a second. You brought up Le'Veon Bell. If we're talking about price point from the daily fantasy side, he's $7,700 on DraftKings this week, but he's also right up there with 2 other guys sort of in that range that I'm also very intrigued by this week. And again, I don't know if you necessarily can feel 100% confident with them in cash, but in tournaments, certainly I think they're absolutely in play, considering a lot of people are going to be on Christian McCaffrey at $10K and a lot of people are going to be on Dalvin Cook at $9,500. So you have Le'Veon Bell, $7,700, best matchup of the week by far amongst these 3 guys, I should say. But then you have Aaron Jones, Green Bay on the road against the Chargers. The Chargers have struggled against the run, especially so what David Montgomery was able to do to them last week for Chicago. Green Bay has clearly made a commitment to the run. Aaron Jones remains a top, 5-6 fantasy running back based on some of the big games that he's had this year.
Right.
And then you have Nick Chubb, who continues to just get immense levels of volume in the Cleveland Browns running game. They are going up against a backup quarterback this week in Brandon Allen for Denver. Last 2 weeks for Nick Chubb, 20 carries, 122 yards, and 2 touchdowns in the loss against Seattle. The game against the Patriots, he had 20 carries for 131 yards. So he's averaging in those 2 games 6.35 yards per carry, and he's also had a total of 7 targets in the last 2 games as well. I normally don't love to play running backs on the road, but in this case, we talked about Dalvin Cook going up against Kansas City and how he should just obliterate the Chiefs' run defense. I got to tell you, Fensty, I think between those 3 guys, I might like Nick Chubb's upside the best between Le'Veon Bell and Aaron Jones, even though the matchup necessarily isn't the best.
Thinking about Aaron Jones, and he is in a couple of my lineups, it really, what I'm seeing when it comes to any kind of pattern is, even though Jamal Williams on DraftKings is also priced up a little bit more, seeing him at around $5,900,
yeah,
I think that he'll only be utilized more if Aaron Jones has those fumbling issues.
Correct.
So if he struggles, then they'll go to Williams a little bit more. So I'm a little bit more comfortable with that. But at the same time, Ben, I don't have to worry about that with Nick Chubb.
You don't. And even when people think Kareem Hunt is coming back in the next few weeks, I still don't think you're going to have to worry about it.
No. I mean, why give this guy any less usage? He's been able to run on pretty much every single offense. And I mean, I'm including even a defense rather like San Francisco. He was still able to run on them. The Patriots, and if we've seen a few backs have success against the Patriots, but 131 yards on the ground? Come on, Ben. This guy needs to be utilized. I'm still expecting at least 20 touches for him.
By the way, as far as everybody that wants to get on the Jamal Williams train, I think you're starting to see a slow indication that it's Aaron Jones' job to lose. Yes, they're still incorporating Williams. He's still getting between 30 to 40% of the snaps, but the week against the Raiders, only 24 out of 60 snaps. The week against Kansas City, 32 out of 69 snaps. The majority of the snaps are still going to Aaron Jones, and I think that's something to continue to monitor as people are like, well, I really like Aaron Jones, and he's been awesome, but all it takes is one play, and it's the Jamal Williams show. Williams has also gotten kind of lucky as well, getting into the end zone with that crazy catch against the Chiefs last week, so I think Aaron Jones is still the preferred play, and maybe you can even make the indication that if you wanted to fade McCaffrey, if you wanted to fade Dalvin Cook, maybe you can play all 3 of those running backs and have one of them in the flex with Le'Veon, Aaron Jones, and Nick Chubb, where you still get a ton of upside possibility with those games as well. You ready to answer some questions?
I am, but I got one more running back I got to ask you about.
Okay.
This is a guy I have not put in a single lineup that today, this is where it starts for me. Derrick Henry.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought him up.
I'm really starting to put more faith into the Ryan Tannehill-led Titans offense, Ben. Help me out. Even the defense last week, I was able to really cash because of their defense against Jameis, Jonnu Smith, who scored a touchdown, and now all of a sudden, like, people and analysts are talking about Corey Davis in a positive light. It's the guiding light. Ryan Tannehill has definitely improved this offense, but Derrick Henry in this matchup versus Carolina, 5,700 on DraftKings. He will be in my flex spot in a lot of my lineups today.
Yeah, Henry, especially at 5,700, is a really intriguing, sneaky play. And Carolina is actually sort of a reverse funnel team. They're terrific against the pass, but they're terrible against the run. So conversely, I kind of like Carolina's defense in this game. It's a game that they're coming back home. They got embarrassed the week before on the road against San Francisco. But if you believe that the Tennessee Titans defense is going to step up, it correlates really well, both Tennessee and Derrick Henry. So if you think it's going to be a low-scoring game, if you think they're going to be able to neutralize Christian McCaffrey, Tennessee's been a good run-stopping defense this year, but they have had their inconsistencies at stopping pass-catching running backs. So I still think McCaffrey gets his today, but I also think that it's perfectly in play for Derrick Henry to have upwards of 25 touches and maybe over 100, 125 yards and a touchdown or two. So I think there's absolutely a guy like Derrick Henry in play. I think he'll be popular because of the price point, though, at only 5,700.
Right, and I mean, the total on this game, last I checked, was 42. A few things that we should note with that game. Curtis Samuel should actually be active for the Panthers here. Delanie Walker's still out, so Jonnu Smith is still in play. So just remember that for tight ends, if you don't want to spend up for them, I mean, a lot of people are going to be on Waller. People love Darren Waller. But at the same time, what the last couple of weeks have shown is that there are tight ends out there who can get the job done that you're not spending anything for.
Yeah, and we can talk about some of those guys a little bit later on. There are some great value tight end plays. I firmly believe in punting at the tight end spot today, unless you are stacking Oakland and Detroit, unless you feel really good about Travis Kelce this week, unless you're really looking for a contrarian play in Zach Ertz, despite Dallas Goedert getting all the touchdowns the last 2-3 weeks. So we'll get to all your tight end questions. I know that you guys have plenty, but let's start with PD Dubs, who checks in each and every week here on Wake and Rake. He says, "Good morning, fellas. Do I go with Jalen Samuels or David Montgomery in PPR?" So initially, Fensty, I think that might have been a little bit more of a difficult decision. And do we know if James Conner has been officially ruled out for this game today?
Looking at the injury report, as I go back to my notes, I am seeing that James Conner is not expected to play according to Schefter, so there is no official designation yet when it comes to that. But when Schefter reports that he's not expected to play and has had that doubtful tag, then I am assuming that he's not playing. Benny Snell also out in this game.
Yes, but Benny Snell has been officially ruled out. So in this situation, PD Dubs, we're all aboard the Jalen Samuels train. The way that the Steelers and Mike Tomlin use starting running backs is just that. They're the starters. They're the one that gets a bunch of volume in this offense. They're the lead back, and there's really nobody else right now in Pittsburgh that's going to be taking away snaps. Is it going to be Trey Edmonds or Tony Brooks James? Doesn't that sound like a creative player from Madden?
It does.
What a run by Tony Brooks James. It's
TBJ.
TBJ. It's TBJ time. It's Jalen Samuels week, and the problem with Montgomery is that I know that the volume finally was there for him last week, and that was very exciting, especially as a Bears fan, waiting all season long for them to finally incorporate David Montgomery, because the Bears offense needs the running game to do anything for Mitch Trubisky's confidence. The problem is that they're on the road at Philadelphia, where Philadelphia's front seven is terrific. Bears offensive line has not generated any sort of push at all this year, and so when you have David Montgomery going up against a good defensive line, good linebackers, and the matchup presents well for Mitch to be able to try and throw downfield against a terrible Eagles secondary, doesn't bode well for David Montgomery this week.
No, you're 100% right in the way you touted that, Ben. And again, you can throw on the big thing you could throw on the Eagles, but when it comes to running against some of these teams with David Montgomery, even though we saw that nice game against worst matchups, I have to wait and fade with this guy. Not in season long. In season long, it's bye weeks. That's a different story.
Right.
But when it comes to daily with David Montgomery, I have to see him succeed in bad matchups before I can start really going in on him in daily.
Speaking of the Eagles, our buddy Corey out in Winnipeg checks in on Periscope. He wants to know whether we go with Golden Tate, who is at home against the Dallas Cowboys on Monday Night Football, or Deshaun Jackson, who is looking like he is set to make his return for the Eagles. Deshaun Jackson going up against the Bears defense. So normally we would, first glance, I would imagine Fensty say, all right, Golden Tate has to be our guy. But in week one, Deshaun Jackson was an absolute beast. He was clearly Carson Wentz's favorite target in that game. Had 9 targets for 8 receptions, 154 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Now, granted, it was against Washington, so take that with a grain of salt. But in that particular situation, he does make a difference for this team. So wind isn't supposed to be a factor in Philadelphia today. I just checked it via Kevin Roth at Roto World, looking like it's going to be maybe in the high 40s in Philadelphia. Wind coming out of the west at 11 miles per hour. It's really not supposed to pick up any more than 11 or 10 miles per hour. Deshaun Jackson could break one deep against the Bears, but I don't think he's the safest option. I think the safer option is Golden Tate, and if you want to roll the dice on Deshaun a little bit, you certainly can.
You just said it, Ben. Deep play. That's what you're reliant on when it comes to Deshaun Jackson. There are other options there in Philly where with the Giants, yes, Sterling Shepard has cleared concussion protocol and should be active. But I think that actually benefits Golden Tate a little bit more. I think that takes coverage off of him in the slot a little bit because you can't forget about Sterling Shepard. I mean, there's going to be a lot of points scored in this game, I think, from both sides of it on Monday night. So with that, I think Tate, like you said, is the safer option. With Deshaun Jackson, just seeing how he's going to fit and really being reliant on that deep ball, that to me puts me more on the side of Golden Tate for this week.
Let's keep on answering your guys' lineup questions. You're shooting them in via Twitter, also on Periscope and YouTube Live and Facebook Live. This one comes in on Twitter from Dustin Lynn 17. Do you go with Tyrell? He's got a 2-part question, Fensty. Do we go with Tyrell Williams, Tyrell the Gazelle, for the Raiders at home against the Detroit Lions, or Odell Beckham? The Browns are on the road at Denver today.
Wow. I mean, again, you would think that this would be such an obvious answer here, but it's just with the Browns, it's so hard trusting their receiving weapons, Ben. I still here want to go with Odell Beckham Jr.
Okay.
Again, the targets will be there with Tyrell Williams. I mean, how much will that take away when Darren Waller with that impact? So with that, Ben, I still have to go with OBJ. I don't feel great about it, but I don't want to just take him out for the sake of it. You know what I'm saying?
Do you know who scored a touchdown in every game that he's played in this year?
Yes. You got it.
He's prancing. Tyrell, the Gazelle. He's prancing through the fantasy forest, just collecting touchdowns. Listen, if you're looking for the best game script, it's Tyrell Williams. But at the same time, you also know that Odell Beckham going up against a struggling Broncos team, especially now that Joe Flacco is done for the year, not that he was really helping him out much anyway. Right. Backup quarterback. The way that I could see this going is that if Cleveland does build up an early lead, then they just give it to Nick Chubb down the rest of the stretch in the second half. Tyrell I would expect to see, some more deep looks. But if we're actually talking about target volume, Odell Beckham still clears Tyrell Williams.
Right.
7 targets in his last game against the Patriots, 5 catches for 52 yards. He had 2 bad games this year. The 2 catches for 20 yards against Baltimore, the 2 catches for 27 yards against San Francisco. But Odell Beckham Jr. has not had an atrocious season. It just hasn't been an Odell Beckham Jr. season. Right. 11, 10, 9, 11, 7 targets in those other games. 52 yards, 56 yards, but he still had that big game against the Jets for 161 yards and a touchdown. I still think the play here is Odell Beckham, but if you're trying to chase after game script and downfield throws, Tyrell Williams. It's crazy to think that Tyrell Williams is actually maybe the higher upside play, right? But I think in this case he actually is.
It's a good matchup. It's a totally good matchup, and when you're expecting Odell Beckham Jr., who you essentially drafted, if not in the first round, early second round, but most leagues first round in that area, you're expecting him to get 20-plus points, or 15-plus points a week. But the target still being there makes me a bit more confident in Odell Beckham Jr. If it was just 4 targets, wasn't getting open at all, short passes, that's going to be the key for Odell Beckham Jr. You can tell by how many yards he's averaging per catch. So with that, being in that 10 area, 10, 11 yards, short passing, that's what they're going to have to do for him.
All right, also from Dustin, let's answer the second part of his question. Again, continue to get your guys' questions in either on Periscope, on YouTube Live. If we haven't seen them come in, we will make sure that we try to get to them at least on the Twitter side, because we know those are coming in as well. The other one from Dustin at Dustin Lynn 17. Mark Ingram or Josh Jacobs in the flex. To me, Fensty, this is a no-brainer. You go with Josh Jacobs in a far better matchup. I'm assuming that he's going to be good enough to go. Mark Ingram has to deal with the Patriots front seven, and unless the ball's at the 1-yard line, Lamar Jackson already has more rushing yards than he does.
Right. And again, it's a great matchup. I mean, with Detroit and Oakland, I mean, this is where I'm going to have a lot of exposure to in a lot of different areas in fantasy today. With Josh Jacobs, you saw how good he is against bad run defenses, and especially going back to that Bears game, too. So with that, I'm going to go with Jacobs here.
Fair enough. From Der Burgermeister on the tweet machine, it says, top of the morning, would you go with Mike Williams or Devontae Parker to flex in a PPR today? So we've talked a little bit at the beginning of the show, Fensty, about Miami taking on the New York Jets and how guys like Devontae Parker and Preston Williams are in really intriguing matchups this week against the Jets corners who have been atrocious this year. I'm starting to come around a little bit on Mike Williams, and part of the reason is that his target volume has just been massive the last few weeks. But I can't understand, and maybe you can explain this to me. I'm not sure where all the love for Mike Williams, at least this week, is coming from. Is it because they expect Phillip Rivers to be chucking it down the field to try and keep up with Green Bay? Because the matchup with being shadowed likely by Jair Alexander is never a good matchup for any wide receiver whatsoever. But are we looking at Mike Williams saying, all right, this is a guy in the last 4 weeks that has gotten 13 targets, 10 targets, 6 and 6, leading the team in air yards. At some point, he's going to come down with a couple of touchdowns. He still has no touchdowns on the season. Are they just looking at and saying the positive regression is coming from Mike Williams, or do they genuinely believe he has a leg up on Jair?
Do you think that because Keenan Allen out of the slot and teams really just focusing on just keeping him in check, do you think then that with the Chargers eventually they think, well, this is the other guy. He's got to get open. He's got to be able to score. Because, again, the last few weeks have been very underwhelming. This season has been very underwhelming for him. And right. I know he's been a little bit banged up again with the back earlier in the season. But still, when it comes to Phillip Rivers, and, I mean, a lot of this is going to be dependent on what the score is and how much the Packers are up by against this Chargers team. And a big impact player that could be back, Davante Adams. We were talking about Devontae Parker before. Davante Adams, he hasn't been ruled out of this matchup, Ben. Questionable with the toe injury, and having him back, that can make Phillip Rivers in the position to throw more.
No, you're absolutely right. And again, I think based on my logic here, is that the target volume is there. They're going to still try to expect him to get red zone opportunities, but Keenan Allen can still catch touchdown passes. They've clearly made an effort to throw the ball to Hunter Henry, and Austin Eckler is getting opportunities in the red zone as well. So
man, Ben, that's a situation right there, and we'll answer the question in just a second. I just have to bring that up. One of the hardest decisions that I'm going to have to make: Melvin Gordon versus Austin Eckler in a league. It's very, very difficult.
Well, where do you see things going? Because I've tended to buy low on Eckler, and part of the reason for me doing so, Fensty, is that I just think they trust him. I genuinely think that they know that he's going to be able to make something special happen, even in limited carries. He's essentially a wide receiver now, Fensty, and so I think they feel good about whatever role he's going to have. Conversely, Melvin Gordon had one really good run where he looked like Melvin Gordon last week against the Bears, and I wonder if that starts to open things up. A lot of sharp money coming in from Vegas is on the Chargers this week, not necessarily to win, but to cover against Green Bay at home. So maybe they're starting to believe, okay, no more Ken Wisenhunt. Maybe they're going to open up the running game. Anthony Lynn used to be a running back coach. Maybe they start to see the trend going in the right direction for Melvin Gordon here.
Right, and that's the thing. I'm short passes to Eckler. That's what I'm relying on in this matchup. And with Melvin Gordon, you're right. He doesn't look the same. I mean, we're talking about Melvin Gordon and one good run thus far, and still seeing him get 8 carries, it's just very discouraging to me.
Just ridiculous with Melvin Gordon. He's been brutal, and anybody that invested any sort of draft capital into him has been terrible. Thanks for
holding out, Melvin. It worked out great for you.
I know. Listen, he's trying to get paid. I have a hard time really calling him out for it, though.
You can, though.
Okay. So did we answer the question with Mike Williams or Devontae Parker? I don't know if we ever really did.
No, because we don't. It's Devontae Parker who wants to answer that question. But the Jets, you're able to score points on them, and the targets, they've been there the last few weeks for Devontae Parker. So 18 targets last few weeks as well, playing a little bit better. It's and he's scored in the last few weeks as well, the last few matchups that he's had.
So you're going with Parker?
Man, I mean, with the price, I mean, we're talking season long here, right? Not daily.
Season long.
Season long. We're gonna go with Parker and roll the dice, even
Okay.
though I hate
It's
myself.
also a PPR, and
Okay.
he's gotten,
So,
18 targets in the past 2 weeks?
yes.
Okay. Ugh.
I don't like it either, Ben.
All right, so there you go. That question has been answered. Is there any other plays in that game, Fensty? Whether it be the quarterback spot, Sam Darnold, Ryan Fitzpatrick, anybody that you're going to be in on for today with Miami and the New York Jets?
Man, I've wanted to give Preston Williams a look. I've really wanted to. I mean, the targets are still there for him as well. He's just not getting in that end zone. But again, when it comes to daily, seeing how cheap some of these Miami receivers are, I want to give him a little bit of love. That's the guy that I'm looking at in this game, Ben.
Fair enough. This one comes in from Randall on Twitter. He wants to know, do we go with Mike Williams yet again or Jordan Howard, but this time it's non-PPR. So that makes it a little more interesting because I think at some point if you believe the touchdowns are going to come back from Mike Williams, that's what you're chasing after a non-PPR. Conversely, Jordan Howard gets a revenge game against the Bears, and we had talked about this a little bit earlier, just on our own. Jordan Howard is getting plenty of volume in the Eagles' offense, far more than I would have initially anticipated for this team with the amount of weapons that they have. But I think it depends on what you believe this game is going to look like. If you think the Eagles firmly beat the crap out of the Bears, Jordan Howard's going to play the majority of the snaps. He's going to get upwards of 18 to 23 carries. Last week against the Bills, they were up 31-13. He had 23 carries for 96 yards and a touchdown, and also was targeted twice in the passing game. If you think the Bears are going to be able to go back and forth and Mitch might actually complete a couple passes downfield, then it doesn't look like Jordan Howard is going to be the guy. I do think they force him to get into the end zone, Fensty, for the revenge game factor, but I think the higher upside play for sure is Mike Williams.
Yeah, it is. And again, I'm going to be starting Jordan Howard in a few of my leagues, and I will have him in daily as well in a couple of lineups. I think this is still a great spot for Jordan Howard, even though now with Deshaun Jackson back, I mean, how will Miles Sanders be utilized? He's fine. He's healthy, even though last week with the shoulder, we thought there was a little bit of a concern, but still, I still think Jordan Howard has a role on this team, Ben.
I think so, too.
I mean, I want to go with Mike Williams, but I'm just not that excited about it, Ben. I feel like if I'm chasing a touchdown, it's Jordan Howard.
So you're going to go Jordan Howard?
I'm going to go Jordan Howard here.
Okay. It's tough though, man. Like that's the thing. Like we're trying to figure out how we want to go with this. Like, do you worry about Miles Sanders being incorporated more because of how the Bears have struggled against pass catching running backs this week, or at least this year?
Of course, but I also worry about how Hunter Henry is back into this offense for the Chargers. It's the same thing to me.
It's a bummer, man.
That's a tough one.
We'll try and figure out where we want to go. From PD Dubs, season long. He's watching us on YouTube Live today. What's your expectation for Josh Gordon playing with the Seattle Seahawks? Listen, we talked about Sam Darnold seeing ghosts a couple weeks ago. I think fantasy owners are still seeing ghosts. They're seeing the ghosts of Josh Gordon from 2013. They're living in the past, Fensty. I know that he's had some nice moments with the Patriots. I know that he's shown some flashes. He's still only 28 years old, but the offense that he's going to in Seattle is still run dominant. They also have plenty of deep weapons that Russell Wilson already feels comfortable throwing to. He has DK Metcalf, who's been an air yards machine. He has Tyler Lockett, who's always a constant deep threat for them. I just don't see the ideal situation. Jerron Brown is catching long touchdowns as well. So even if they move Lockett to the slide and they move Gordon to the outside in Seattle, I just don't see it because I just don't think the targets are going to be there for him.
Right. I mean, if you're chasing this guy who's going to get, I'd say 3 to 5 targets a game to start. I'm also depending on a deep play from him, which, again, that's going to be a lot of competition for Metcalf as their wide receiver 3 and their tight end situation in shambles right now, especially because of the Disley injury. I think there's a place for him. When it comes to starting him, I'm going to be a spectator for the first couple of weeks. Fine, you want to pick him up for the big playability? Totally fine, especially if there's really nothing else on your waiver wire. But right now you're viewing him as that third option in the wide receivers. And like you said, Ben, very run heavy with a couple running backs that they have. There are only so many plays to go around.
No doubt about it.
By the way, I just want to go back to something. I want to go back to something because it's been on my mind. I'm doing a little bit more on the fly research with this.
Yeah.
Mike Williams over Jordan Howard.
Oh, okay. You've changed
Okay,
your mind?
I changed my mind. I'm just looking at numbers, and again, with Deshaun Jackson being back, go chase Mike Williams.
Okay. Very good. We can move on then. We have both gone on and agreed with Mike Williams today against Jair and the Packers. That's dangerous, but we feel good about it. Tight end toss-up. Okay, we can start to get into some of the tight end conversations from S. Curry 08 or Scurry 08. It really depends on how you look at it. Scurry 08 or S. Curry watching us on YouTube Live today.
Stephen Curry.
TJ Hawkinson for the Lions against the Raiders, or Jonnu Smith for Tennessee. The Titans, I'm trying to remember the matchup for Tennessee this week. They are at home, or excuse me, they are on the road against Carolina.
Yep.
I have to see if I can find it because my buddy Derek Brown over at the Quan Edge had a really, really good stat on TJ Hawkinson. Oh, here it is. 48.3% of TJ Hawkinson's targets have come in 2 games versus teams 15th or lower in DVOA versus tight ends. The Raiders are 29th in DVOA versus the tight end position, have been bleeding out points to the position regularly. Over the past 4 weeks, starting tight ends versus the Raiders, targets, receptions, yards, and touchdowns. Guys like Darren Fells lit him up. Jimmy Graham lit him up. Trey Burton didn't get the job done, but he's Trey Burton, so he sucks. Eric Ebron lit him up. Jack Doyle lit him up. TJ Hawkinson could be a really sneaky play this week, Fensty, with everybody going on Stafford and Galladay, or with everybody going on Stafford and Marvin Jones.
Yeah, I mean, you like we keep saying, you need exposure in this matchup. And, as much as I like Jonnu Smith here, I'm actually going to roll with TJ Hawkinson with that side of it. Again, with Jonnu Smith, we saw him get more targets, and Fitzpatrick will still look for him in there in the red zone. But at the same time, when it comes to this matchup against the Raiders for the Lions, I have to go with TJ Hawkinson.
Yeah, I think Hawk is the
play.
Tannehill
will find Jonnu Smith, but I'm more reliant on that touchdown, especially when starting him in daily.
Yeah. By the way, for those of you that are interested in finding out what's going on in the London game, I believe we are officially at the half. And let me go ahead and get the scores and information up for you from this game over at Wembley Stadium between... it is at the half, and I got to tell you, if you took the under, you're feeling pretty good. I am not feeling great about what I've seen so far. I really thought there'd be a little bit more fireworks in this game. Once again, Leonard Fournette has not gotten into the end zone for Jacksonville. Houston has a 9-3 lead. And to be honest, Fensty, I figured the run success rate would go up with no J.J. Watt on the field. They have not been able to get the ball going. Gardner Minshew has had some stalled drives. I think they had a kick blocked as well from Josh Lambo. Duke Johnson's having a nice game, 4 catches, 57 yards. He's caught all 4 of his targets. DeAndre Hopkins has done nothing today, 3 catches for 10 yards. Carlos Hyde has 9 carries for 38 yards. Deshaun Watson, 15-20, 134 yards and a touchdown. Meanwhile, Gardner Minshew, 10-15 for 94 yards. Fournette, 6 carries, 26 yards. And as far as the pass catchers go, DJ Chark caught the first 2 passes of the game, 2 for 14. That's been it. Chris Conley, 1 of 12. Do you think we'll start to see a little bit more fireworks in the second half in this game, Fensty?
You would think so with this Houston team, and also we always say is attacking Houston. What's going on here, Ben? What's up with the water in London?
Clearly, the things are spinning the wrong way. I guess that's the other side of the hemisphere. It's not like in Australia where the toilet bowl flushes the wrong way. I was going to make a joke, and then I realized that it wasn't going to go through. So, hopefully we'll see a little bit more offense.
Kenny Stills went down at one point in this game.
I think he ended up being okay. I think he was just a little bit shaken up. But right now, 9-3 going into the first half. I think over the process of the show, Fensty, I may put in a live wager on the over in the second half. I think at some point they're going to start to put up some points in this game, but maybe I'm wrong.
It's at 12 right now.
It's got to be. Yeah, I got to figure out what that line will be as we continue to answer your questions. Here's one coming in from Raymond, who's watching us on YouTube Live. Raymond, I think you're new to the show, so first of all, welcome. Appreciate you joining us here for Wake and Rake this morning. Pick 2 running backs for a standard league. And, of course, he must be new to the show because he's given us 5 different running backs to choose from. Melvin Gordon against the Packers, Austin Eckler against the Packers, Chris Carson versus Tampa Bay, and Sony Michel against the Ravens. So, standard league, I don't think you can do Austin Eckler right now. And that's not to say that he hasn't gotten to the end zone. He has the last few weeks, but If you're only getting 5-6 carries on the ground, I don't know if that's really the way that you can go in this game. So I think I'm moving on from Austin Eckler. Conversely, Chris Carson gets so much volume each and every week, but he's going up against the one team, Fensty, that was able to slow down Christian McCaffrey this year.
Right.
So where do we go? Do we trust Sony Michel against Baltimore? Do we go back to Melvin Gordon against Green Bay? The Packers are not good at stopping the run.
Right. No,
what do we do?
What I'm doing here is I'm not taking Chris Carson out of my lineup. I'm not playing the matchup in that regard.
Okay.
Now, I'll say this. I'd be much happier if James White was out, but it's looking like he's going to be in. However, kind of like what we were saying about Eckler, you could view James White as a receiver as well. So that right there could put the ball into Sony Michel's hands a little bit more. I'm actually going to go with he needs 2 from these 4, right?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to go with Carson and Michel here. I think Michel's getting in the end zone against Baltimore.
Because he's Sony Michel, that's what they do. They line him up at the goal line.
You might be getting a guy that could get like 10 carries and he gets like a 1-yard rushing touchdown, but I think it's there, especially in standard, for him to do so.
I suppose that's true. I just have such a hard time ever recommending to go with somebody like him just because...
Are you taking out Carson in this matchup?
No, because I know that the volume is going to be there. I'm almost more willing to roll the dice on Melvin Gordon this week, and I feel like that's a mistake. That's a really good question from Raymond. I'm having a really hard time trying to figure out what I want to do here.
I mean, the thing with Melvin Gordon, again, we're hopefully seeing him on the upwards trajectory now with that after seeing him last week break a little bit. But the thing is, when I'm looking for a short touchdown, I mean, that's where right now with Sony Michel, that's something that I can rely on.
So you're going Carson and Michel, and we avoid the situation with the Chargers?
I am for this one.
I think I'm going to go Carson and Melvin Gordon because I do think Gordon gets into the end zone against the Packers. I think Carson will probably punch one in from one out, and I think they're still going to give him 20 carries. With Michel, he might get 15 carries for 24 yards. Maybe he gets into the end zone. I don't know. I feel like it's a James White game from New England this week that just kind of has all the different telltale signs for it, and that's probably a direction that I'm going to go. So we're torn on this, Raymond.
And I don't hate it, Ben, because when it comes to who can get a chance in terms of yardage to get more overall, it's, again, Melvin Gordon has that upside, but still, who do I think is going to score that touchdown? I mean, again, with all the Chargers options we keep talking about here, Sony Michel, I think we're going to see him get in the end zone once.
That's probably that's probably fair because there's been enough of a sample size too for Sony Michel to get himself into the end zone and go ahead and make that work. Right now, it doesn't look like there's any questions coming in, at least in the last minute or so. So if you guys have lineup questions, we are here for you up until the bottom of the hour. Another 20 minutes to go. Fensty and Heis on Wake and Rake. We'll also go over some of our Twitter questions as well. See if there's anybody that you are really intrigued by. Oh, here's one from at KCRoyalty25 over on Twitter. He says, "What's up and good? Do you go with DK Metcalf or Juju Smith-Schuster this week?" So we saw Juju Smith-Schuster, and I'm trying to remember where I heard the stat, Fence, because I'd like to get a credit. Juju Smith-Schuster is basically putting up the same season that he had last year, except he's getting 4 targets less per game. So it's not really his fault. He's still having a fairly impressive year. And he's going up at home against the Colts versus DK Metcalf, who had 2 touchdowns last week, but only for 13 yards. But it's a better matchup. So do you go with the better matchup and the guy with probably a higher upside play in DK Metcalf, or Juju, who is going to get upwards of 6 to 8 receptions over the course of the game?
I'll be a little bit safer. I'm very encouraged from what I saw. And I don't fully blame Juju. He's gone through multiple quarterback changes throughout the season, so I can't fully hold that against him there. He, in terms of his production, guilty by association because of the quarterback situation. I'm still going with Juju here. Feel a little bit safer with the targets.
Yeah, I think you're right. He's the safer play. And again, I have Metcalf in a lot of daily lineups this week in tournaments. I think you can even make a case for him in cash just because of how much Russell Wilson is looking his way in the red zone. And especially if you want to have exposure to this game with Russell Wilson or Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf, and on the other side with Jameis or Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Cameron Braid, assuming that he's able to play. This is one of those games that you want to have exposure to in DFS this week. But you're right. I think the safer play is Juju Smith-Schuster, and then DK Metcalf is probably the higher upside play. Let me ask you a question about that game. We were talking about the different Seattle plays you can go with. Are you buying in on Jameis Winston once again this week, knowing that he's almost a lock, Fensty, for 300 yards and a couple of touchdowns, even though he's going to turn the ball over?
See, I hate that. I hate that, Ben. I hate that I have to go into this Jameis Winston matchup every single week being like, okay, I have to be accepting of the fact that he's going to turn the ball over. I really don't like going for him in DFS, Ben. I know that there are going to be certain matchups that are incredible for him, but I never feel comfortable with him. I just don't. I rarely have any exposure to the Buccaneers because of this guy.
I know, but it depends on where you play him. In season long, it tends to hurt you a little bit more than in daily.
Right.
3 interceptions is only minus 3 points. So, he's had some 4 interception games where it's just 4 points taken away. Conversely, like if it's a fumble, I think that's minus 2. And then the touchdowns, that those are going to be about an extra 8 points plus the 300-yard bonus. Like, to me, Jameis Winston almost feels like available in cash, which seems crazy considering that he's so all over the place. You just don't know where he's going to be able to bring you.
Right, look, and if he's going to be getting 300-yard game after 300-yard game, then fine, you're protected in that regard, Ben. It's just with him, this is a guy I just really don't like going with. I don't feel good about going with him in daily.
I think that's perfectly reasonable.
The matchup, but again, that's just me. The matchup is good for him. So if you want to go after him, that's fine, but you know what you're getting when you go in with Jameis or even any of his receivers as well.
Perfectly reasonable. So there you go. Those are our perspectives on that pick. How about my buddy Nathan checking in on Twitter at Hermanson Nathan on Twitter? Better flex option today between Devin Singletary, Terry McLaurin, or Miles Sanders. Buffalo is hosting Washington today. This should be a nice breakout opportunity for Singletary. Terry McLaurin, unfortunately, going up against an incredibly tough pass defense, and Dwayne Haskins is now the one that's throwing him the football. So that has some concerns for me as well, because he was getting plenty of volume from Colt McCoy. Or not from Colt McCoy, but from Case Keenum. And then you have Miles Sanders going up against the Bears. He's been getting limited snap volume because of Jordan Howard. To me, Fensty, I think the better play in all of this is Devin Singletary, unless you worry about Frank Gore taking all the targets away.
I mean, I'm always worried about that, him taking touches away, and I wish he could get a few more carries and make me feel safe in that regard. Take McLaurin out of there immediately. When it comes to Miles Sanders, it's just, again, with Jackson coming back, what is his role going to be exactly? That's something that I am willing to wait and see for today. With Singletary, yes, you can roll the dice with him. Again, it's very encouraging seeing him get targeted in that passing game, getting that touchdown. It's against the Redskins as well. So, and they don't have a ton of options. I mean, you're worried about guys like Cole Beasley, John Brown. Expect John Brown every kind of double coverage. But outside of them, too, I mean, Singletary could still be active in that passing game. I'm willing to roll the dice with him as well. And in fact, just as we're talking about him, I'm actually redoing a couple of lineups where I'm adding Singletary so I could double down with all of you. If he fails, we all fail together.
Very good. There's a bunch of games, Fensty, that we haven't had a chance to get to yet as we continue to wait for your questions, as we got about another 14 minutes left here on Wake and Rake for this morning. So if you have questions, go ahead and get them in before we move on.
We haven't done this yet on Wake and Rake here. Why don't we go over some of these games with higher Vegas totals and talk about ideal plays? We can literally go through all the matchups from the highest totals to the lowest. I think that's something that we should start doing.
Let's do it. Let's go ahead and make that happen. All right, so let me go ahead and get my little handy-dandy cheat sheet, sort by total. Do you care whether or not we start with an afternoon game versus an early game, or just go through the games of Sunday?
No, we can start. If you want to start with the afternoon games, the early games, we can with there. I have them all written down, organized, ready to go. That's how, by the way, for all of those out there that are looking on how to prep, because Ben and I, just like you, we're the common fantasy players here, we do a lot of research, but we want to teach you our processes as well so you can learn how to do the right research. Ben especially all over Twitter follows great guys. Derek Brown especially quotes him all the time, and Derek Brown knows what he's talking about. But we're going to also show you on Wake and Rake how you can Wake and Rake by doing your own research as well.
You know what else I do, Fensty? I listen to Wake Up Fantasy Sports every Saturday morning.
Oh, thank you.
Get that knowledge. Get that little
Yes.
John and Pemba into my brain as well. That's one way to do it and get a little bit smarter in the process. Now, every Saturday morning, make sure you guys are listening to Fensty on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio, getting your knowledge. No need for a cup of coffee to get your weekend started. My guy is here for you. All right, we're just gonna go Fensty by team totals, or by the over-unders here, and we'll even include whatever games that people have a chance to play on the main slate today. So the number one projected total today is Tampa Bay on the road at Seattle. This game opened at a total of 53. It has since moved down to 51. And it also has gone from the Seahawks at -6.5 down to -5, which tells you that there's some money on Tampa that thinks that they can keep up with Seattle in this game. That's part of the reason, Fensty, like we talked about, that I am on board with Jameis Winston. I love Chris Godwin in this matchup because of how much zone Seattle plays. It tends to be like the Mike Evans show one week and then the Chris Godwin show another week. I think both of them are in play this week, going up against Russell Wilson, going up against the Seattle defense. But I think you can make an argument that anybody from these offenses are in play in the highest total of the week.
Yep, absolutely. And just some injury notes on that. Quandre Diggs is actually doubtful for this matchup, so that helps your point even further, Ben. But here's another thing with the tight end situation in Tampa. Brayton's being listed as questionable. O.J. Howard is out. So that's one area where you're going to have to be careful and can't get too cute. So if you're going in on this Tampa offense, it's really only the big guns. That's what you're really looking at. And you can't really rely on this run game. I can't figure it out still, Ben. So with that, taking out the run game, you're looking at the big guns there for Seattle. Yes, I'm going to have some Metcalf and I'm going to have some Lockett in there. Ben, I try to think of this from a sports standpoint, knowing that Josh Gordon is there now. Thinking if you're a guy like Jaron Brown or even David Moore, if you're extra motivated to try to keep your spot, and Brown has dropped some touchdowns this year.
Yes, he has.
So I'm wondering if it's too sneaky maybe going with a guy like that, thinking he'll be extra motivated to keep whatever spot he could hold with Gordon there now.
There's also David Moore, who is $700 less than Jaron Brown. One guy that, I heard Adam Levitan talk about on the Daily Fantasy Edge podcast, and he's a guy that plays a lot of preseason. He mentioned Tanner Hudson, the backup tight end to Cameron Brate in Tampa Bay. And then I heard Al Zeidenfeld say that his comp is Cameron Brate. So maybe if Cameron Brate is out, 2,500 bare bones minimum, you take a dart throw at Tanner Hudson and maybe he gets himself into the end zone. He was great in the preseason, Fensty.
Right. Why not at this point?
Right.
It's you want exposure to these offenses, and even though I'm saying with Jameis Winston, I'm not a huge Jameis guy, even for daily, the matchup still shows. And Ben, you made a great point. That's even though he could throw as many picks as he wanted, he could throw 5 picks. As long as he's throwing for 300 yards, then we're good there. We're protected.
No, I think you're spot on. So in that particular situation, I think there's plenty of guys that you can play and feel very good about this week. In my cash lineup this week, Fensty, I'm probably going to have Jameis and Godwin, and then run it back with DK Metcalf. Now that could change, only because I might just want to say screw it. I want the complete no worry, no heart attack mode of just playing Russell Wilson, but then I got to find another $1,100 to be able to spend up for him, and that's not something that I feel great about. Conversely, I just know Jameis is going to be chucking it all over the field, and they're not going to run the ball, versus I don't know that about Seattle. So in this particular moment, I'm probably going to stick with Jameis and Godwin in cash. The Lions are going to the Raiders today. That's another total that is also at 51. It has also moved down, but only a half a point from 51.5 down to 51. Matthew Stafford continuing to chuck the ball downfield. He is hit up with Kenny Golladay, who had a big game last week. A lot of people, I thought Fensty might be on Marvin Jones last week, but the public's getting a lot smarter, and they've shifted, and they knew that Kenny Golladay coming off a dud was more likely to be targeted in an ideal matchup for him. So do you have Stafford? Do you have Golladay? Do you believe in Marvin Jones and T.J. Hawkinson like I do? And on the Raiders side, Derek Carr quietly putting up some nice outings. Him, Josh Jacobs, Tyrell Williams, and Darren Waller are also in play. I really like this game as another stackable game in DFS this week.
Yes, and I will have exposure to this all over the place. And Ben, with your DFS lineups, when I choose my quarterback, I tend to always pick at least one of their receivers. Do you tend to do that, essentially handcuffing your lineups a little bit? Or
depends. It depends on the quarterback. Like if I wanted to play Lamar Jackson, I'm probably playing Lamar Jackson naked. I just feel like that's sort of those guys where if I can't predict where a lot of those targets are going to go to, Aaron Rodgers is another guy. Like without Devontae Adams, if I wanted to play Aaron Rodgers, I don't know if it's going to MVS. I don't know if it's going to Geronimo Allison. I don't know if it's going to Alan Lazard. Conversely, with Jameis Winston, I always think it's a mistake not to pair him up because you know where the target tree is. Matthew Stafford, the target tree is likely Galladay and Marvin Jones. Phillip Rivers, at one point you could consider making an argument to not play him naked because he was chucking the ball to Keenan Allen all the time, but now it's started to get spread out. I think it's purely dependent on what quarterback you play. But the quarterbacks that I am playing at least this week, Fensty, I have exposure to all of them with at least one wide receiver.
Right, and it's funny you mentioned some of the receiving options for Detroit here, but here's a guy who's been getting targeted a lot, 19 in his last two matchups. Danny Amendola. 4,700 on DraftKings. Again, you want him to get in the end zone, but if he's getting targeted that much, short passes for him, that's someone that if very sneaky right there. If you want to still hook up Stafford with one of them, I don't fully recommend it. I don't build your lineups around that. But if you really want that Stafford exposure, there's a cheap option. I'm going after Galladay in a lot of my lineups today. That's just who I'm paying up for. A comfort factor there to go along with some of those high-priced running backs that we talked about before. But you can't ignore the targets that Amendola has been getting the last few weeks.
Yeah, the games where he's had more than 8 targets, 13 targets in week 1 for 104 yards and a touchdown. He basically gets, whenever he gets 8 or more targets, he gets 95-plus yards. So, and then he also has an opportunity to get into the end zone, although he only got in week 1 so far. I feel like if you're chasing after some of the points, I prefer Marvin Jones to Danny Amendola for 1,300 more. I just feel like the upside is way there, and I feel like he's not going to have the same ownership as Galladay. But, Galladay is priced at 7,700 this week, and that might just be too expensive for a lot of people. Like, if you're looking at the list of all the different wide receivers available on the slate today, you have Adam Thielen, 7,800. You have Chris Godwin at 7,300. Kenny Galladay at 77. Stephon Diggs at 76. Tyler Lockett at 75. Tyreek Hill at 74. So Godwin clearly feels like the value of all these different guys. Devontae Adams coming back from the injury is still 7,100.
Right.
Like, I think playing Galladay is actually going to be a little bit sharper than you anticipate, Fensty. Even though he was great last week, just not a lot of people are looking at the game logs here. Second most highest expensive wide receiver, I think people are going to go elsewhere this week.
I'm going to stick with Galladay then, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, then I think you're going to get him at lower ownership, and I think that's an absolute bonus for you.
And if he happens to stink, Ben, I'm taking a pie to the face. So I have a lot more riding on Kenny Galladay this week.
No, it's actually, you know what? We didn't do that last week.
No. Are you gonna enter? Is Ben Heisler entering the #FFPie bet?
Yes, I will do so, but I need to know who. I always get confused by this. So am I in it with you and Howard? Am I just choosing a wide receiver on my own?
So here's how it works.
Okay.
Just so, because all of you can tweet us and enter as well. I'll tell you what happens if you lose. What it is you're playing against the Fantasy Alarm Show on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio, which you can hear from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern during the week. Okay. You're playing against Howard Bender, former Major League Baseball general manager Jim Bowden, yours truly, and Ani Sridhar, one of our other producers at SiriusXM. And what we do is we have our own draft. Lisa Ann actually puts the draft order together every week.
Okay.
We put that video out so there's no conspiracy or anything like that. We're very transparent. We each have a wide receiver. We draft in order. Then you guys out there, and whoever loses between the 4 of us, it's full point PPR. So whoever scores the lowest amount of points has to take a pie to the face between the 4 of us, and then $10
let me follow up. Has Bowden lost yet?
Yes, Bowden has actually lost twice.
Has he gotten pied in the face on camera
yet?
He
has gotten pied in the face twice.
Okay, good for Jim Bowden. I figured he would have tried to avoid that.
Yes, we pay up. So how this works is, and for every pie that you take, Fantasy Alarm donates $10 to the Children's Fund as well. So there's actually big charitable effort in this as well. And you get a shirt from them if you #FFPieBet. You lose, you pay up. You get a shirt from Fantasy Alarm that says, I got pied in the face.
Okay. All right.
I'm a lot you get. But how it works is between the 4 of us, the loser takes a pie to the face. But after the 4 of us pick our receivers, You guys out there have the entire field. You can pick anybody else you want to. What you do is you tag at Fantasy Alarm, at SiriusXM Fantasy, at Rotobuzz Guy, that's Howard Bender,
Okay.
and you hashtag FFPieBet and pick the receiver. It can't be one of our receivers, so you can't pick Kenny Golladay. He's my receiver.
Okay.
We got two going right now with DeAndre Hopkins and DJ Shark right now. So
wow,
Howard
someone took
has
Shark?
Yeah, Howard Bender went
Oh,
Shark.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and Ani Sridhar went Hopkins, and then Jim Bowden went Amari Cooper. So we're not going to know about.
Good. Okay. I'm in. I'll submit Chris Godwin.
Okay.
Godwin's my guy today.
He didn't help you out last week, Ben. Just remember that. But this is where you can't let the bias get to you. If you try to avoid the pie always finds you.
Yeah, that's perfectly a logical opportunity for me to get pied in the face. But okay, this is my submission.
All right, you're going to have to tweet it too, Ben.
I will. Okay, so right now, here we are. You just explained the rules of the Fantasy Alarm. What is the FFPieBet?
Yep.
FFPieBet, at Fantasy Alarm, at Roto Buzz Guy, at Fensty Sports, Fantasy Alarm PieBet. Benny Heis, formerly of Fantasy Sports Markets, now with Wake and Rake with Heis and Fensty, submit my pick of Chris the Godwin for my submission this week. And I'm feeling fantastic about it. I will not get pied in the face this week, and if so, I will happily do so on behalf of a great organization and helping out a great cause.
Yep, when we chart everybody who enters, so if you don't want to pay up, you lose, and you try to duck us, Howard Bender is going to find you. He is the Pie Master Enforcer, and he will find you, and you pay up, because that's how it is. You have to, if you lose to all four of us, you just have to beat one of us. Can't be that hard, right? But if you lose to all of us, you have to submit a video, tweet out a video of you getting pied in the face.
There you go. I am ready. I'm fully on board. I love my pick this week. All right, Fancy, we went through some of the high total matchups. Let's quickly go through some of our favorite cash plays in DFS this week, starting at the quarterback spot. Obviously, Russell Wilson is a great play this week. I believe in Jameis Winston on the other side because I know that he's going to put up volume. Matthew Stafford, another play that we both really like this week. Any other quarterbacks that you're going to have exposure to today?
I mean, why not look at the other side of that Stafford matchup and go with Derek Carr, 5,500 on DraftKings. He's in a good spot. We've talked about a number of plays, Tyrell Williams, Darren Waller, that you could go in on him with, and that's a good price point for him.
I'm with you there. I think Phillip Rivers is also a very inexpensive guy that I'm going to have some exposure to this week. Ryan Fitzpatrick in my tournament lineups this week, him and Preston Williams and Devontae Parker, run it back with Robbie Anderson on the other side. I feel good about that. And, of course, Sam Darnold certainly in play this week as well.
What about Mitch Trubisky?
Listen, it's a really good matchup. Just anytime someone says his name, I throw up a little bit in my mouth. But it is a great matchup, and Mitch Trubisky won a lot of people $1 million last year when he had that big high upside games. One thing that was actually a big positive for Mitch Trubisky last week, Fensty, is when they got themselves into field goal range before Matt Nagy said, you know what, 41 yards is perfect for our kicker off the street. Mitch Trubisky had a big run. That's something that we haven't seen from him all year. He is athletic. He is fast. When he runs, not only does he put up good fantasy numbers, but the Bears tend to be successful. That was what kickstarted them when they ended up going 12-4 down the stretch last year. So Mitch Trubisky, if he runs against Philadelphia, that's going to open up a lot of passing lanes already. So could he do it? Yes, but I have a hard time believing that he will. I think the Bears are going to have to run in order to create some play action to be successful. Running back, Fensty, we talked about the guys in the 7,000 range with Le'Veon Bell and Aaron Jones and Nick Chubb. Josh Jacobs certainly in play, and of course everyone will be playing Jalen Samuels at 4K. Toss-up between McCaffrey at 10K or Dalvin Cook at 9,500. Who of those two top elite level backs do you prefer today?
I'm going Dalvin Cook.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think you can lose with either one. So with that, I'm going to go with the better matchup.
I think somebody asked me, in Kansas City radio when I was hosting Thursday, if Dalvin Cook goes for 20 carries and 105 yards and a touchdown, would you just automatically accept that if you think the Chiefs have a chance to beat the Vikings? And I said yes. That's just a regular Dalvin Cook game. That's just kind of what he does. And the Chiefs are a reverse funnel defense. They've been very good against the pass. They've been terrible against the run. Dalvin Cook should run all over them. I'm expecting at least 25 to 30 touches out of him today.
Ooh.
You also mentioned Derrick Henry as a guy that you really like this week. I think he's in play. And don't forget about the Jordan Howard revenge game factor for the Eagles as well.
I got one.
Okay.
What about, this is the guy we haven't talked about yet. What about a Phillip Lindsay?
Against Cleveland's defense at home?
Yeah, I mean, look, no Flacco. So you would think by game theory they'll have to rely on the run a little bit more. And again, I'm not fully comfortable. I know Royce Freeman is there as well, priced actually pretty similarly. Still, Phillip Lindsay, though, he's on my mind a little bit.
Phillip Lindsay, after that game where listen, everybody runs against the Chiefs. He wasn't able to. Only 11 carries for 36 yards. Got himself going again a little bit last week against the Colts. 14 carries, 59 yards. Also got targeted 5 times in the passing game. I don't hate it. I think you can run on Cleveland a little bit, but they should still dominate the line of scrimmage, especially on the defensive side of the ball, maybe not on the offensive side of the ball. And I do expect Cleveland to win this game. I think this is a big opportunity for Nick Chubb. So, yeah, Phillip Lindsay at 5,300, I don't hate. I prefer spending up an additional 400 to play Derrick Henry.
Right. One more stupid question. The ultimate spend down. Mark Walton. I mean, he's against the Jets, so it's a beatable matchup. I don't feel comfortable, but if you're sitting there and you're going stars and scrubs and you've got 4,700 left to spend on a back, any confidence from Benny Heis in this guy?
Well, would you rather play Mark Walton at 4,500, Devin Singletary at 4,700?
Singletary.
Okay, that's the direction I'm going in. You can also spend. Melvin Gordon is 5K. If you believe he's finally going to get some volume in this offense, you can play him. Royce Freeman is 4,900. I just think there's better plays than Mark Walton. I feel like it's going to be Ryan Fitzpatrick chucking the ball over the Jets. But you can absolutely expose them through the running game as well. At the wide receiver spot, Fensty, we talked about my guy Chris Godwin, who I'm taking in the FF Pie Bet for Fantasy Alarm. You can also throw out Mike Evans and Tyler Lockett. Stephon Diggs is expensive, but he's in a great spot against Kansas City as well. Kenny Galladay. Keenan Allen. At 6,400, Fensty, I'm buying back in on Keenan Allen because he doesn't have to face Jair Alexander, and I do think Phillip Rivers is going to be throwing it around quite a bit. He's probably my value quarterback on the slate, and I think you can pair him up and probably not get a ton of ownership on him this week.
If I am going Rivers, that's the play. That's the only way, is that I'm going to have to double down on him. And again, 21 targets for Allen in the last few matchups, like that very much.
From one Allen to another, Allen Robinson against Philadelphia. Are you buying in on him this week?
Yep, said it earlier. Again, you could throw on this team, and you know how skilled Allen Robinson is. I have to go in on him. I'm worried a little bit about ownership, but at the same time, he will be in a lineup for me.
Also, don't forget about the Miami wide receivers against the Jets and Preston Williams and Devontae Parker. Also, some cheap wide receivers if you're looking. You have DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel, 4,800 and 4,300 respectively against Tennessee. I think both of those guys are in really nice spots. Tennessee has struggled against the pass so far this season. Alshon Jeffrey also has a revenge game against the Bears, but they did play last year, so it's not as big of a revenge game.
Right.
And then Mike Williams, if we're talking about going back to the Chargers here, 4,600, getting a ton of volume, especially a lot of red zone looks. At some point, he's going to start catching touchdowns. And then Danny Amendola at 4,700 for Detroit, going up against the Raiders. Finally, at the tight end spot, Fensty, this is a week I believe that you spend down at tight end if you're playing daily. Of course, Darren Waller is always a great choice. Same thing with Travis Kelce, Zach Ertz, and Hunter Henry. But then I like TJ Hawkinson quite a bit this week. I think Noah Fant is a really intriguing play for Denver for me. At some point, he's going to get himself going. Jack Doyle, I actually think, is another really intriguing play for the Colts, considering that no T.Y. Hilton, that allows a little bit more volume for him in the middle of the field.
Do you worry about Ebron at all?
Maybe getting some red zone looks, but I know that Jack Doyle is still going to get about 65 to 70% of the snaps.
Right.
So I don't feel as bad about it.
Can't be relied on as much anyway this year. Has had a few key drops, Eric Ebron. So I see where you're going with that. Other guys that I like as well, I mentioned this before, Jonnu Smith, I think, is still in play. 7 targets, very encouraging with Tannehill last week. But again, looking at 3,800 versus 3,700 with Smith versus Hawkinson, that's really where I'm going to look when spending down at the tight end. It's going to be one of those two in a lot of my lineups.
So there you go. Fensty, where can the good people find your work? Where can they hear you on the radio as well?
Well, at Fensty Sports on Twitter, and you'll be able to hear me throughout multiple shows on SiriusXM moving forward here, so we'll announce more on that. You just got to keep following me. Also, fantasyalarm.com for all of your basketball needs as well. We got some DFS NBA slates to crush, so if you're getting crushed by football, A, play daily, but B, play daily basketball as well, because I'm always watching that tape.
Yeah, go get that buckets, and I probably need to just give you a call on the other side of this video, because season-long fantasy hoops off to a bit of a slow start for your boy. Not a lot of guys coming through at the point guard position, but
Yep.
we'll get through that together. So thank you guys for watching as always. Thanks for being a part of the show. He's Fensty. I am Ben. We will be back with you next Sunday at 10:30 a.m. East Coast time at 9:30 a.m. Central. Enjoy the Slot Fest from London that continues as the game goes on, and good luck everybody in week number 9 of the National Football League.
Good luck.